There's a really interesting report that is coming out here that is saying that the Las Vegas Raiders may actually be looking to trade Jackson Powers-Johnson. And by the time the trade deadline comes up next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, JPJ might not actually be with the Raiders. And we'll actually see in this upcoming game against Jags if JPJ even plays. As you guys know, he was pulled in the last game that the Raiders had against the Chiefs. And some people are saying he might actually be traded. Albert Breer, who works for Sports Illustrated, I think Breer is one of the best insiders in the NFL. He put it out there, he talked about some of the trade candidates before the trade deadline, players that could be moved. And he gives some good insight. I'm not going to lie. There's some pieces in here that I didn't really know before I read this article. He puts it out there. The situation in Las Vegas is interesting because Pete Carroll is trying to build a program, and the roster is so thin that trades could undermine his ability to make progress on that front over the back end of the year. Teams have called on tight end Michael Mayer, whom the Las Vegas Raiders could actually extend in the offseason, and then cornerback Eric Stokes, and apparently they've been told no, right? Teams have reached out on Michael Mayer and Eric Stokes, and they've been told no. And that to me is kind of interesting in its own right. And let's talk about this for a second, and we'll talk about JPJ here in a second. Michael Mayer, I think he's a good football player. I think he has potential to become really good at some point, but he's also going to always kind of be limited with the Raiders. And I know we can run a lot of 12 personnel and put two tight ends out there together. Injuries also happen. But I also think the Raiders are going to get to a point where Brock Bowers is going to be the highest paid tight end. He could make $30 million in 4 years whenever that time comes. $30 million, right, for Brock Bowers, which means Michael Mayer could also be somewhere around 15 to 20 million. Maybe less than that, but let's just say 15 million. Are the Raiders going to actually pay that to Michael Mayer? I find it interesting that the Raiders are deciding to keep Michael Mayer. And of course, if you're only offered a 5th round pick, you're not going to trade Michael Mayer for that. But if some team out there says we'll give you a 2nd or even a 3rd round pick, you should consider that if you're the Raiders, because yes, having 2 good tight ends does make your team better. But usually, your 2nd tight end could be like a blocking tight end. It could be like a rookie, a backup. And you'll still find success with that 2nd guy, given Brock Bowers is your number 1 tight end. I don't know. It's just kind of interesting. But the other guy he kind of throws in there is cornerback Eric Stokes. And again, the Raiders have basically said no on both Michael Mayer and Eric Stokes. And again, we don't know what the compensation element of this is, but Eric Stokes has kind of turned his career around a little bit. He was benched with the Packers last year, which I think was like year 4 for him. Coming into year 5, he's always kind of been talented. He's always had upside. He's always kind of flashed. And he's looking to get paid, essentially, right? He wants to be able to prove that he's a good football player. And for the most part this year, Eric Stokes has been pretty solid. We don't have Nnamdi Asomugha on this roster. There's no corner that's going to give up no catches, no touchdowns. We're not going to have that type of guy, but Eric Stokes has been a good, productive football player for the Raiders. And I'm not surprised the Raiders have decided to keep him, given, even as you kind of go forward, you need scheme fit type of guys, and Eric Stokes is a great scheme fit for Pete Carroll. Now, talking about Pete Carroll, I personally am not sold on Pete. I'm not a believer in what he's building with the Raiders, and I do hope I'm proven wrong, but apparently guard Jackson Powers-Johnson has drawn trade interest and has had his fits and starts with this new staff, so there's a possibility he'll get moved. So that right there, that piece by Albert Breer has a lot of Raiders fans talking about what to kind of expect as we go forward. Will Jackson Powers-Johnson actually be traded? Remember, against the Chiefs, he was pulled. Alex Kappa came in. Alex Kappa played a lot of snaps, not a lot, but like 10 snaps, which given in that game, we had like 30 snaps in total. That's a big percentage of the snaps that the Raiders had. But JPJ was pulled. He was essentially benched. And that was according to Pete Carroll, right? He's put it out there. And we're not stupid, all of us can already kind of see this. Pete Carroll does not like JPJ, and that's just clear, right? It's very, very clear. Maybe JPJ has too strong of a personality. Maybe for Pete Carroll, JPJ isn't humble enough. But I'm telling you guys, man, I watch a lot of offensive linemen in the NFL. JPJ is much better than majority of the guys in the NFL. And the thing is he came into the NFL and they said, you're a guard, even though he was a center for the entirety of last season. And then 7 games into it, he switches to center, and he dominates at center, right? JPJ was a top 5 center last year for the Raiders. And keep in mind, he did not practice the center position in that offseason coming into his career in the NFL. He did not practice at center. He practiced at guard. And then he goes into this offseason, thinks that he's the center. He practices center the entire offseason, comes into of OTAs and minicamp, starts training camp, and he's still technically the center. Spent an entire year practicing at the center position, and then ultimately gets moved to right guard. To me, this guy has never had the chance to develop at one given position, but at center, he showed flashes. And even if he's a guard, he struggled at guard a little bit. Guard's different than center. And I think JPJ, even as a guard, could be really, really, really good. But if he's going to be your starting guard, he needs to have an entire offseason where he's told you're the guard. He needs to have an entire year. He needs to take snaps for an entire year. He doesn't need a coach like hovering over the top and saying, you're not good enough. We're going to replace you with Alex Kappa, who, by the way, is garbage. JPJ, to me, is a really, really good football player. If the Raiders somehow do decide to trade JPJ, I'm already not a believer in Pete Carroll, but that's just a little bit more, for me at least, where I realize Pete Carroll's just not good, right? We're not in 2002 anymore. If Pete Carroll does not know this, we're not in 2007 anymore, right? The head coaches, yes, they run things, but, that style of coaching, it just doesn't work anymore. We had Josh McDaniels who came in here and said, I'm going to be, everybody needs to get in line. It's this way or that way. There's no other, it's my way or no way, essentially, right? Super hard, super difficult, super strict, I think is probably the right word. That stuff doesn't work anymore. Look at the Baltimore Ravens. They are a player-run team, and they're the best team in the NFL, or one of the best teams. Look at the Niners, the way they run things. To me, the way the Raiders are doing things right now, I don't agree with it. JPJ is the type of person he is. He's a really good football player. I think for the Raiders, to say we're not going to give this guy that opportunity, chances are in 2 years, Pete Carroll won't even be here, right? He'll probably be fired. So I hope John Spytek, who probably makes the decisions, does not trade JPJ at some point. We'll get a better coach that'll put JPJ back at center. We'll see what ends up happening. We'll see what ends up happening as we kind of go forward. If JPJ is traded, I can guarantee you guys a team that's willing to trade for him will probably put him back at center, and he'll be an all-pro caliber player, right? I can guarantee you guys that right now. Also, I just want to just kind of throw this out there. If you are saying, hey, we run a heavy wide zone scheme like the way the Dolphins do, for example, and you're not going to bring in Derrick Henry because he's not a scheme fit. If you're the type of coach where you're saying, hey, we're going to run a heavy dose of West Coast. We need our quarterbacks to be really good with the timing. You're probably not going to bring in a quarterback like Caleb Williams, who's not great with timing, but he's a creator. It's just a little bit different, right? Like, you want a scheme fit, right, for your quarterback, for your running back, maybe your corners, right? You want Eric Stokes instead of Jacorin Bennett. For offensive linemen, scheme fit's not a real thing. Like, it's not like JPJ isn't a scheme fit for this team, right? So this is my whole point, right? Scheme fit doesn't really matter. Good players are good players, especially at offensive line. So we'll see what ends up happening. Maybe the Raiders trade JPJ. We'll see if they make any moves. Something tells me the only guy that's going to end up getting traded for the Raiders is going to end up being Jacoby Myers, which we'll see if he does as well. We got a couple more updates I want to get into, so if you guys have not heard, the Jacksonville Jaguars wide receiver / cornerback Travis Hunter was hurt during practice Thursday. He hurt his knee. And then, of course, he'll be placed on IR, and he'll miss at least 4 games. Head coach Liam Cohen said this Friday morning. So, if you guys don't know this, if you guys have not heard, Travis Hunter is feared to have torn his ACL. That's not technically confirmed. It could be a lesser of an injury where he is out only 4 games. But people are saying he was playing the corner position and it was a non-contact knee injury, which usually means it's some sort of ACL injury, right? But we'll see what ends up happening. And, of course, the Raiders play the Jaguars, right? So they're going to be without who I think is a superstar at wide receiver. And, of course, he has to actually prove it. But, like, I think he's already kind of that player. Same thing with, like, Malik Neighbors. You already saw the upside with those guys. In their rookie years, they're, like star caliber players. And for the Raiders, it just makes it a little bit easier as you go forward. You don't have to think about Travis Hunter and where this guy's lined up. Now, the Jags still have other good weapons on offense. They still have Brian Thomas Jr., who I believe is healthy and he should be playing. They have Travis Etienne at the running back position. I think he's a pretty good running back. Super explosive. Bashal Tutin is their backup running back. He's pretty good as well. But like the Raiders are about to take on a team that there's not a lot of like super explosive. You got to worry about every single one of these guys. Like for the Raiders, this is a game that's winnable. And I kind of want to talk about some of the Jags uh, players a little bit. Kind of do like a game preview essentially. So Maxx Crosby, Adam Butler are expected to play. They're expected to be back for the Raiders. Brock Bowers is fully healthy. Tyler Lockett's brought in. He's going to be good to go. The Raiders on paper have never looked better, have never been healthier. They've never been at this point on paper. And the Jags have lost 2 straight games. I think Liam Cohn, he started off on fire. He looked really good early on. And I believe they started off 4-0, and now they've lost 2 straight. So I think they're 4-2. And, now they got this injury issue that kind of just happened with Travis Hunter. There's a chance the Raiders can actually win this game. And I think for the Raiders, you have to try to beat the Jags because the Jags still might end up making the playoffs. They might compete for a Super Bowl. Who knows, right? If Travis Hunter isn't fully healthy, Devin Lloyd comes back and he's good to go, they may push for a Super Bowl. And if the Raiders can potentially beat this team, that would speak volumes of the team that the Raiders are. And I'm not saying the Raiders are going to make the playoffs this season. Our record's pretty awful, although statistically it's not impossible if you win every game going forward. We're not going to do that, though. We're probably not going to make the playoffs. But you can still win games and then have momentum carried into next season. And I think for the Raiders, that's kind of what you got to look forward to. You got to try to win right now, and you got to try to win enough where you can go into next season and say, hey, we won 7 games last year, or 8 games. And more than that, we won, 7 of the last 9 or 10 games. We're a good football team, right? It just took us time to click. It's a new scheme. It's a new system. Remember, Kyle Shanahan only won like 4 games first season with the Niners. So it takes time sometimes for it to actually come together and click. And I think the big thing for me is the fact that, I think Chip Kelly can't really run his scheme entirely because the offensive line's kind of weak. And I'm not saying the offensive line's perfect, but you can make adjustments as a coach, which I think Pete Carroll will get Chip Kelly to be able to do. You can have an extra blocker, extra running back, an extra tight end. You can double team and keep 7 guys to block and run your shot plays. You can run plays a certain type of way. And I think Chip Kelly will make those adjustments. So I want to see the Raiders try to win some of these games. Now, there's also some individual matchups that I'm excited to watch. I think the defensive line that the Jags have is really, really, really good. And I want to see guys like DJ Glaze go up against Trayvon Walker. I want to see DJ Glaze go up against Josh Allen. DJ Glaze, coming into the season, people are like, hey, this is the future for the Raiders at right tackle. These are the type of matchups that DJ Glaze has to be able to step up for. And then at the same time, I want to see how the center and left guard kind of respond to guys like Eric Armstead, guys like Mason Smith, Khalil Sanders, and another pretty good pass rusher. I want to see some of these interior offensive linemen. Again, I don't know if JPJ is going to start, so I don't mention him, but I want to see how our offensive line can handle that defensive line. It's a really good defensive line. Devin Lloyd might not play for the Jags, so again, the Raiders just got to go out there and let's see if we can score some points against a good football team. All right, see if we can have success, we can find success, and we'll see what the Raiders can kind of do as they go forward. I also want to see Maxx Crosby get fully healthy. Some people have talked about this with Maxx. I don't know if you guys have heard this, but apparently Pete Carroll has used Maxx Crosby the wrong way. And part of this is that Maxx Crosby's lined up way too close and way too tight, as opposed to being like a true edge player. And I want to see if Maxx Crosby can have some snaps on the outside. And, he'll be going up against Anton Harrison, who was a first-round pick back in 2023 for the Jags. He's a pretty good offensive tackle. I want to see Maxx Crosby have one of those dominant games where it's like absolutely felt. I'm not saying Maxx hasn't had good games, but I feel like we haven't seen him like just take over a game like we've seen him do in the past. I also want to see if Malcolm Koonce can start to flash and kind of continue to get healthy. I see a lot of people talking about Malcolm Koonce, talking shit about Malcolm Koonce specifically. And it's kind of wild to me because, people, I don't know if it's people don't understand, or maybe they don't know, like, this is how it works. I just assume that everybody understands how it works. But usually when you have a major knee injury, like the way Malcolm Koonce did, that first year back, you're not going to be the same type of player you once were, right? You'll be at like 60%. And over time, you get back to form. And over time means like 12 months, 18 months after you initially have that injury kind of happen. And I think we're at the point where Malcolm Koonce, he hasn't been great this season, but that's expected. He tore his ACL. And some people are saying that this guy's garbage, he's trash, he sucks. But the thing is the guy tore his ACL. It's going to take him time to get back to form. But I want to just continue to see him, play good football. He has flashes, but I want to just see it be more consistent as we kind of go forward. And then Tyree Wilson, right? Maybe he can watch Trayvon Walker and try figuring out a little bit, right? That was the comps that I think a lot of people had for Tyree was Trayvon. We'll see what ends up happening, man. I am excited for Raiders football. I'll continue to say this. Maybe it was because of the bye week. I'm excited, man. Let's see if the Raiders can get this win. Let me know what you guys think. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.